What if the worst day of your life is still happening, right now, in a fold of space-time you can't see or touch? And what if that's not a terrifying thought, but the most liberating one you've ever encountered? I want you to sit with that for a second. Don't run from it. Don't try to comfort yourself out of it. Just let it sit there, right in the middle of your chest, and notice what it does to you. Because most people, when they hear something like that, feel a cold little shiver. They think, no, I don't want that. I've worked so hard to put certain things behind me. I've done the therapy, or I've done the not therapy, or I've done the long midnight walks and the journal pages and the slow, difficult work of building a life that doesn't feel like it's constantly being ambushed by what happened before. And now you're telling me it's still happening? That sounds like a nightmare, not a gift. And I understand that. I genuinely do. But I want to stay with you for the next little while and turn this thing around slowly the way you turn a stone in your hand. Because I think when you see the other side of it, when you really see it, something in you is going to settle in a way it hasn't settled in a long time. Here's what I want you to know before we go any further. This isn't a video about mindfulness. It isn't about forgiving yourself or letting go or healing your inner child or becoming the best version of you. I have enormous respect for all of those things, and some of them are genuinely useful. But this is something different. This is about physics, about the actual, mathematical, peer-reviewed structure of time itself. And what physics says about time, if you follow it all the way to its conclusion, and then ask what that means for a human being who has lived and loved and suffered and wondered, is one of the most quietly revolutionary things I have ever had the privilege of thinking about. So here is what I'm asking from you today. I'm asking you to stay curious. That's all. Just stay curious, because the thing I'm going to share with you isn't difficult, exactly. A fifth grader can understand the core of it, but it does require you to be willing to let a familiar story go. The story that says, the past is behind you. The story that says, time flows like a river, and what's downstream is gone. The story that almost every culture in the world, almost every piece of advice you've ever been given about how to live, has been quietly built on without ever questioning. That story is not as solid as it looks, and I'd like to show you why. Let me start with something beautiful and strange, something that actually happened, not in philosophy, but in a laboratory. Or rather, in the long, careful work of mathematicians and physicists staring at equations until the equations started staring back. In 1905, a man named Albert Einstein, and look, I know that name shows up everywhere and it can start to feel decorative, like wallpaper. But I want you to actually think about what he was doing. He was a young man working in a patent office in Switzerland. He was not famous. He was not surrounded by great minds who encouraged his thinking. He was, in a lot of ways, doing his best thinking in the margins of other people's work. And what he noticed, while turning over the problem of light and motion in his mind, was something that broke the clock. He noticed that time is not what we think it is. Time is not a universal metronome ticking away at the same rate for everyone, everywhere, forever. Time is relative. It bends. It stretches. It is affected by how fast you're moving and by how much gravity is pulling on you. Two people can experience the same event and come away having lived through genuinely different amounts of time. This isn't a metaphor. It has been measured. It is real. The GPS satellites in your phone have to account for this effect, or your directions would be wrong by miles. But Einstein didn't stop there. And his colleague, a mathematician named Hermann Minkowski, took what Einstein had started and pushed it into a shape that matters enormously for what we're talking about today. Minkowski showed that if time is relative, if it bends and stretches, then the only way to make sense of reality is to stop thinking of time and space as two separate things and start thinking of them as one thing, one structure, four dimensions, a thing physicists call spacetime. Now here is the moment I need you to pay close attention to, because this is where the mathematics does something to your understanding of the past that is genuinely, permanently strange. In a space-time universe, in the block universe, which is what physicists call this model. Past, present, and future are not sequential events. They are locations. They are coordinates in a four-dimensional structure that exists all at once. The way north and south and east and west and up and down are all equally real directions in space, even when you're only standing in one place. Past and future are equally real directions in time, even though you only ever experience one moment at a time. Think about that for a moment. Right now, you're sitting somewhere, maybe your bedroom, maybe a bus, maybe a coffee shop, and London exists, and 1987 exists, and 3 Tuesdays ago exists. You're not in any of those places or times right now, but that doesn't make them unreal. It just makes them somewhere else in the structure. Your past is not gone. It is somewhere else in the structure. The moment when you were 7 years old and you fell off your bike and you cried in a way you can still feel in your body if you try, that moment exists, right now, at its coordinates in space-time. The physics doesn't know it's over. Physics doesn't use that word. Physics uses located. I want to pause here and just let that breathe for a second, because I know it sounds like I'm doing a trick with words and I'm not. The block universe is a genuine, seriously considered, mathematically coherent model of reality that many physicists believe is the correct one. It isn't fringe science. It isn't wishful thinking. It follows directly from special relativity, which is one of the most thoroughly tested theories in the history of human knowledge. We've tested it with particle accelerators and satellites and atomic clocks, and every single test has come back saying, yes, this is how time actually works. So when I tell you that every moment you've ever lived is still playing somewhere in the universe, I'm not being poetic. I'm being as precise as I know how to be. Now, and this is where it gets personally important, where it stops being an interesting piece of physics trivia and starts being something you can actually feel, let me ask you a question. What does this change? If your past isn't gone? If it's located, permanent, and coded into the structure of reality with a fidelity that makes the best human memory look like a rough sketch, then what does that do to the way you carry it? I think most of us carry the past like it's a wound that keeps reopening, because we believe on some deep level that if we don't keep touching it, it will disappear. We rehearse our old pain because it feels like the rehearsal is the only thing keeping it real. We revisit old grief because we're terrified that if we stop visiting, the thing we're grieving will be, finally, irreversibly, gone. But what if it won't be? What if it can't be? What if the universe, whatever it ultimately is at its deepest level, is a perfect and absolute record keeper? And it is holding everything that ever happened with a care and a completeness that you will never have to maintain yourself. That changes the job, doesn't it? The job of memory, the job of keeping faith with the people and the moments that have mattered to you. You don't have to keep it alive. It already is. Let me tell you about arrows. Specifically, let me tell you about the way most of us watch arrows. When you fire an arrow into the sky, there's a moment, right at the apex of its arc, right at the highest point before gravity begins its insistent work, when the arrow seems to hang, just for a fraction of a second. And it's beautiful. And then it falls, and when it hits the ground, we say the flight is over. That's how we experience time. We watch the arrow from the ground. We see it as a thing in motion, and we grieve the arc the moment it begins to fall. But imagine for a moment that you could step outside the whole scene. Step outside time and look at the entire trajectory at once. Not the arrow at any particular point in its flight, but the complete parabola. The whole shape that the arrow makes from launch to landing, every point in the arc existing simultaneously as part of one coherent geometric form. From that vantage point, the arrow hasn't fallen. The arrow is its flight. Every point of the journey, the moment of launch, the highest point, the landing, all of them are equally real, equally present, equally part of what the arrow is. Now translate this back to you. You are not the arrow at its current position. You are the entire arc. The 7-year-old who cried on the bike is not a you that used to exist and has since been replaced. The 7-year-old exists at a specific coordinate in the space-time structure of your life, and that coordinate is permanent. The version of you that made the decision you still regret at 3 in the morning, real, located, not gone. The version of you that was happy in a way you're not sure you've been since, still there at those coordinates, still in the middle of that exact happiness, as complete and alive as any point on the parabola. What you call losing yourself, the feeling of becoming unrecognizable to earlier versions of who you were, is not the destruction of those versions. It's a change in your vantage point. You have moved to a different location in the arc. The other locations didn't cease to exist when you left them. They can't. That's not how the structure works. I find this thought so clarifying I sometimes have to just sit with it in silence for a few minutes. Because one of the most corrosive things that happens in a human life is the creeping sense that you are fading, that the good versions of yourself are slipping into the past, and the past is like a drain, and everything that falls into it eventually becomes nothing. And once you've accepted that story, unconsciously, the entire project of being alive starts to carry this low-level panic, the panic of impermanence, the terror of being temporary. But you are not temporary, you are extended through time, and the part of you that is behind you is as real as the part that is in front of you, and none of it is being destroyed. You are the whole arc. Now I need to turn towards something harder. Because I've been talking about the past in general, in this sort of warm, golden way, and I know that's not how the past always feels. Sometimes the past isn't a photograph you keep face down because it's too beautiful to look at. Sometimes it's a room you're trying very hard not to walk back into. I want to talk about grief, specifically about the strangest and least spoken dimension of grief. Not the sadness of it, which everyone acknowledges, but the permission problem. Here is the permission problem. A little while after losing someone you loved, not immediately, but a little while, once the acute part has passed, you start to feel moments of genuine happiness again. Small ones at first. A funny thing happens. You laugh. And then, right in the middle of the laugh, something curdles. A voice says, "How dare you? How dare you be having a good moment when they're not having any moments at all? How dare you be here, present, alive, laughing, when they are gone? That guilt is real. I'm not here to dismiss it or pathologize it. It comes from love, which means it's worth taking seriously. But I want to look very carefully at the assumption underneath it, because I think the assumption is wrong, and I think the wrongness of the assumption is causing a lot of unnecessary suffering. The assumption is, they are experiencing nothing, and you are experiencing something, and the difference between those two states is the thing that your happiness is violating. But if the block universe is right, if the person you loved exists at their coordinates in space-time with the same permanence and reality as any physical location, then what is actually true is not that they are experiencing nothing. What is true is that you and they are at different coordinates. You cannot access each other's coordinate right now. That's different from absence. That's different from nothing. Two cities are equally real when you're only in one of them. The fact that you're in London doesn't mean Paris isn't happening. Paris is full of its whole, complete, real Parisian life. Whether you're there or not, your presence is not the condition of its reality. The person you lost is not less real because you can't access their coordinate. Their realness is not conditional on your ability to reach them. They existed completely and permanently. The specific weight of their laugh, the way they held a cup of coffee, the thing they always said when they were nervous. All of it is encoded into the structure of space-time, at coordinates that are as real as any point in physical space. And now here is the gentle structural thing I want to offer about grief. The healthiest form of grief may not be detachment. It may not be letting go. It may be something closer to accurate cosmology. It may be grief as the recognition of distance rather than deletion. Because distance, unlike deletion, can be held in the mind with something closer to peace. You can miss Paris without believing Paris has ceased to exist. You can love Paris from London without it being a madness or a delusion. The love you carry for someone who is at a different coordinate in time is not phantom love. It is not love directed at a ghost or a memory or a fiction. It is love directed at someone real, someone permanent, someone whose existence in the structure of what is real is not diminished by the fact that your coordinates don't currently overlap. Grief is real. I'm not pretending it isn't. Loss is real. The change in the structure of your daily life, the chair that's empty, the phone that doesn't ring, the particular way someone used to say your name, all of that is genuinely gone from the present coordinate, and the pain of that absence is completely valid. But gone from the present coordinate is not the same as gone from reality. And I think that distinction matters more than we've been allowing it to. Now I want to talk about you, not the grief version, not the memory version. You right now, today, in whatever particular configuration of confusion and hope and exhaustion and curiosity brought you to a YouTube video with a title like this one, I want to talk about the version of you that you're trying to leave behind. Because there's one more thing that self-help culture does with time that I think deserves to be examined, and it's this: the implicit project of becoming someone different from who you were. The idea that the old you was a rough draft, that the work of personal growth is fundamentally the work of replacement, out with the old, in with the new. Burn the old version. Let it go. Leave it in the past. And on the surface, this sounds fine, it sounds like progress, but there's something underneath it that's been quietly causing a lot of damage, and I want to name it directly. If you believe that the goal of growth is to replace the old version of yourself, to put it behind you, then you've accepted a framework in which your current self is only valuable as long as it performs well enough not to be replaced next. There's no flaw in this framework. There's no ground. You are always one bad year away from becoming someone else's old version. You are always on the edge of your own obsolescence. This is not a stable place to live from, and I think a lot of the low-level anxiety that characterizes modern life, the constant nagging sense that you are behind where you should be, that you are not enough of the right version of yourself, comes directly from this framework, from the implicit belief that you are a draft that needs to be finalized. But what if every version of you that has ever existed is a real version, not a draft, not a rough cut, not a precursor to the version that really counts? A complete, located, permanently real version of you, doing the best it could with the nervous system and the information and the circumstances it had at that specific point in the terrain of time. The version of you that was most broken, that was genuinely struggling, making choices you regret, saying things you can't take back, being smaller than you wanted to be. That person was real, fully, permanently, unreservedly real. They don't need to be rehabilitated or transcended or left behind. They need something simpler and harder than any of those things. They need to be witnessed. Witnessing is not excusing. I want to be very clear about that. To witness something is not to approve of it, or to defend it, or to decide it was fine. To witness something is to see it clearly, to look at it with your eyes open and say, yes, that happened. That was a real moment in the terrain of a real life. That person existed at those coordinates, and they were doing what people do when they have the particular combination of pain and fear and love and confusion that that person had at that time. The act of witnessing your own past, really seeing it without the distortion of shame or the protective fiction of excuse, is the beginning of a kind of self-relationship that doesn't require you to keep running, because you can only run from something you believe you can outrun, and the physics suggests, gently but firmly, that you cannot outrun your coordinates. They're already there, they're already permanent. So the question isn't how do you escape them, the question is how do you live in right relationship with them. Let me try to pull these threads together into something simpler, into principles, into things you can actually hold. The first one is this: time is not a river, it is a landscape. I know I've said this already, but I want to sit with it a little longer, because the river metaphor is so deeply embedded in how we talk and think and feel, that it takes more than one pass to actually dislodge it. When you think of time as a river, the past is always downstream, behind you, receding, eventually dissolving into the distance. The future is upstream, ahead, coming toward you, unknown. And you are a person standing in the current, trying not to be knocked over, trying to keep moving. The river doesn't care about you. It just flows. This metaphor makes the past feel like it's always being taken from you. It makes loss feel inevitable and permanent and totalizing. It makes you feel like a person who is losing things constantly, like someone slowly emptying out, moment by moment, as everything meaningful slips downstream. But the landscape metaphor, the block universe, changes this completely. In a landscape, north doesn't disappear when you're heading south. The mountains to the east don't become fictional because you're standing on the western plain. The past exists the way a mountain range exists when you're in a valley, out of your current view, but absolutely and entirely there. And this changes the nature of loss, not the emotion of it. The emotion is what it is, and it's real. But the ontology of it, the question of what has actually happened when something is over. In the river, over means gone. In the landscape, over means somewhere else. I keep coming back to how much unnecessary suffering we've created by walking around with a river in our heads, when the best physics suggests we live in a landscape. The second principle is about the present moment, because I've spent a lot of time so far talking about the past, and I want to be very clear. I am not arguing for living in the past. I am not arguing for nostalgia or rumination or the refusal to move forward. What I'm arguing for is a different reason for living fully in the present, a reason that doesn't require you to pretend the past doesn't matter. Here's the thing about the present moment that most people miss. It isn't special because it's the only real one. If the block universe is right, it's not the only real one at all. Every moment is equally real. The present moment is special for a completely different reason. The present moment is the only point in the entire structure of space-time where you have authorship. The past is permanent and complete and unchangeable. You can witness it. You can understand it. You can change your relationship to it. But you cannot change what it contains. Its coordinates are fixed. The future is open. The future is generative. The future is yours to shape. And the present, right now, this exact moment, this specific point in the four-dimensional terrain of your life, is the interface between those two things. It is the point where the permanent becomes the permanent, where what will someday be fixed coordinates is still alive and movable and entirely in your hands. Whatever you do right now will exist fixed and real in the structure of space-time for as long as the universe keeps its records. That is not pressure. That is dignity. That is the weight of being a creature who makes real things, even small things, even sitting here right now following a thought, letting something change in the way you understand your own life. This moment is real. It will always have happened. And the version of you that sat here and let something shift, that person exists at these coordinates, permanently, as real as anything has ever been. I want to think about what that does to even the smallest Tuesday, a Tuesday where nothing remarkable happens. A Tuesday where you're tired and the light is flat, and you make a mediocre dinner and watch something you've seen before and go to bed. That Tuesday, the specific, unremarkable, slightly dull texture of that Tuesday, exists. It is encoded. It is a real day in a real life. It doesn't need to have been remarkable to have been legitimate. I think one of the quiet tragedies of modern life is the way we've started rating our days, the way we've imported this optimization framework. Was this day productive? Was this day meaningful? Was this day good enough? And applied it to the raw, continuous, irreplaceable fact of being alive. A day doesn't have to justify itself. An hour doesn't have to earn its place. You being alive today, confused and tired and not quite sure what you're doing, is a real event in the universe's permanent record. It counts, because it happened. There's a related thing I want to say about the bad moments. Not just the ones you regret, we talked about those, but the ones that were simply painful. the ones where life was genuinely, physically hard. Illness, failure, rejection, grief, the long middle part of difficult things when you can't yet see the end. Self-help has a complicated relationship with these moments. The dominant narrative is, they happened for a reason. They were a lesson. They were the setup for something better. They were a chapter that led to the next chapter. And while I understand why that narrative is comforting, I want to push back on one implication of it. Because that implication is, the hard moment is only valuable as a means to an end. It only matters instrumentally. It justified its existence by producing something better. But that's not quite right, and it's not right in a way that quietly diminishes the person who went through it. Every moment is complete in itself. A moment of genuine suffering, real, serious, physical or emotional suffering, is not a lesser moment. It is a moment. It existed at full resolution, with full reality, with the full weight of what it costs to be a person in a difficult circumstance. It doesn't need to have produced a lesson to have been real. It doesn't need to have led anywhere. It was, it is. It will always have been. And there's something in that, something in simply acknowledging the realness of the hard moments, without demanding they justify themselves, that I find more genuinely comforting than any narrative about reasons or lessons. Because reasons and lessons can be wrong. They can fail. The lesson you thought you were learning can turn out to be the wrong lesson. The growth you thought came from the suffering can turn out to have been growth you would have done anyway. But the realness of the moment, the permanent, structural, cosmically encoded realness of what happened, that can't be wrong. It happened. That's enough for it to matter. All right, we've been in the big ideas for a while, and I want to come back to the ground, to the practical, because this is the part where I always get nervous, where philosophy has to justify itself by actually changing something. And I want to be honest, I'm not going to give you a system. I'm not going to give you a 10-step framework. What I want to give you is 3 very simple, very quiet things you can do, not to fix yourself because you are not broken, but to practice standing inside time differently. The first one I want to call the coordinate exercise. Pick a moment from your past that carries some weight. Not the heaviest one, not the one that requires a therapist or a long retreat or a lot of support, just one that you've been carrying, one that comes to mind sometimes at unexpected moments and just sits there, a little uncomfortable, a little unresolved. Now, and this is the key part, instead of thinking of it as something that happened to you from the outside, as an event that struck your life from somewhere else, try thinking of it as a location, a specific set of coordinates, a particular room with a particular quality of light at a particular time of day. The way a specific street looked in a specific season, the physical, spatial, sensory reality of a specific moment in your life. You're not going to try to change how you feel about it. You're not going to try to forgive anyone or reach any conclusions. You're just going to see it the way you'd look at a location on a map. This is a place. A real place. In the terrain of my life, this place exists. And then, from that little bit of distance, ask yourself, who was the person who existed at those coordinates? Not who they should have been, not what you wish they had done differently. Who were they actually? With the specific nervous system they had, with the specific information they had, with the specific circumstances they were in. Can you describe them the way you'd describe a stranger you respect, with clarity and without cruelty? You might find that this changes something small. The moment stops being an intrusion, something that breaks in on your present life, and becomes a location. Something that is at its coordinates, minding its own business, not actually chasing you. Locations don't chase you. Locations just are. The second practice is even simpler, and I want you to try it today. I'm calling it the permanence anchor. Pick one good thing that happened recently, not a peak experience, not the best day of your year. Something small, a moment of genuine ease, or a conversation that was warm, or a meal that was actually good, or 20 minutes when you felt okay. Now, instead of letting your brain do its default thing, which is to immediately begin mourning the moment the second it's over, to feel the faint anxiety of good things being temporary. Try the thought, that moment exists at its coordinates permanently. The specific version of me that felt that ease is real. That person is not gone. That version of me is located, permanent, as real as any point in the terrain of time. It still exists. That's all. Just try it on as a factual statement rather than a wish. Notice what happens in your body when you say it and mean it. For most people, there is something small that relaxes. Some low-level grief lets go a little. The anticipatory mourning of good things, which is one of the most exhausting habits a person can have, the way we start grieving joy even while we're inside it, gets a tiny bit quieter. I'd suggest doing this at the end of each day, not as a gratitude list. I know those can start to feel performative. Just one thing, one coordinate, one moment that existed today and now exists permanently in the record. You don't have to feel moved by it. You just name it. The third practice is the one that asks the most of you, and I want to be honest about that. But it's also the one that seems to move people the most, so I want to offer it anyway. Write a letter to a past version of yourself. Not the kind of letter where you explain how it all worked out, though I understand why those letters feel comforting to write. The Dear Younger Me, It Gets Better letter is sweet, but it has a slightly condescending shadow to it. It implies that the earlier you only matters because of what they survived and became. It makes them instrumentally valuable rather than intrinsically valuable. Instead, write the kind of letter you'd write to someone you respect who is going through something hard right now. Someone you can't give the ending to because you don't want to take away their experience of living through it. Someone you simply want to witness. Tell them, I see you. I see what this particular moment costs you. I know the specific weight of what you're carrying at these coordinates. I'm not here to tell you it was worth it. I'm not here to promise you it gets better. I'm here to tell you that you are real, completely and permanently real, and that what you're going through is real, and that it matters, not because of what it will eventually produce, but because it is happening and you are in it, and you deserve to be seen. That's the letter. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be eloquent, it just has to be honest. And what most people find when they write it is that the act of witnessing their past self, really clearly without the distortion of shame or the false comfort of hindsight, does something that none of the usual approaches quite manage. It closes a loop. It makes the past feel less like a place you escaped and more like a place you came from. And that is a different relationship entirely. So let me try to bring this home. You came here, wherever you came from. Whatever it was that made you click on a video with a title like this one carrying something. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know the general shape of it because I've lived inside it too. It's the weight of time, the weight of things that happened and couldn't be undone. The weight of people who are no longer where you can reach them. The weight of versions of yourself that you've been trying to either live up to or put behind you, sometimes both at once. And underneath all of it, quiet, constant, rarely spoken, this fear that things disappear, that meaning doesn't hold. That you are temporary in a way that makes everything you do and feel and love ultimately pointless. The map you've been given, the one that says time is a river and the past is downstream and the only direction is forward, and if you stop moving, you'll drown. That map has been causing you real harm, not because it's cruel, because it's inaccurate. It doesn't describe the territory. The territory, according to the careful, rigorous, beautiful work of people who have spent their lives learning how to look at reality clearly, is a landscape, a permanent structure, a four-dimensional terrain in which every moment that has ever been lit up by your consciousness exists at real coordinates, not as a memory, not as an echo. As a location, as real and solid and structured as any mountain or ocean or city on a map. You are not a person who is being slowly erased by time. You are a person-shaped structure extending through time, and every part of that structure is equally real. The parts you're proud of and the parts you're ashamed of. the parts that were happy and the parts that were broken, the parts that others witnessed and celebrated, and the parts that no one ever saw. All of it, real, permanent. Yours, and here is the thing I want to leave ringing in you, the thing I hope you carry out of this and into your ordinary life, into whatever Tuesday comes after this one. You are not behind. You have never been behind. The idea that you are somehow late to the version of yourself you were supposed to be, the idea that the clock has been running and you've been losing, is a story that was invented by people who confused time with a river. You are not behind. You are at your current coordinate. And your current coordinate is real, and every coordinate that came before it was real, and every coordinate that comes after will be real. You are the whole arc. You are every version of yourself that has ever existed, and that is not a burden. That is not a weight to carry. That is the most extraordinary, improbable, structurally guaranteed thing about being you. You are permanent. You always will have been. The universe has been keeping perfect records since before you were born, and it will keep them long after, and in those records, at the coordinates of your specific, unrepeatable life, you exist, completely, for as long as existence keeps its accounts. That's not nothing. I want to say that again, more slowly. That is not nothing. The next time something good ends, a summer, a conversation, a phase of your life, a feeling of happiness you're not sure will come back, see if you can locate it instead of mourning it. Don't try to hold it in memory. Memory is imperfect, and you'll mourn the imperfection too. Just notice. That happened, and because it happened, it is permanent. It is a coordinate in the universe's record of real things. And I was there. I existed at those coordinates. That version of me is real. The next time you find yourself running from something in your past, from a version of yourself, from a moment you'd rather not revisit, see if you can try standing still for just a moment instead. You cannot outrun your coordinates. They are already there, already permanent, already real. The question was never how to escape them. The question was always how to be in right relationship with them. And the next time someone you love is at a different coordinate from you, whether they left by choice or by the kind of leaving that no one chooses, try, if you can, this small and radical thought. They are not gone. They are somewhere else in the terrain. The love is not pointed at an absence. The love is pointed at a location, and the location is real. If something in here moved something in you, even a little, even something very quiet, I'd genuinely love to know what it was. Not to validate this video, because the specific thing that moved you is a clue. It's a clue about where you live inside this question, about which part of the terrain of time you've been having the hardest time with. And I think those clues are worth following. Leave it in the comments if you feel moved to. I read them. And if you want to keep following this thread, the one where physics and what it means to be a person keep bumping into each other in interesting and occasionally life-altering ways, then subscribe. I'll keep pulling on it slowly, carefully, the way things this interesting deserve to be pulled. Take care of yourself. You exist. You have always existed. You always will have existed. That matters more than you know.